They say suburban mornings are supposed to be calm coffee, steaming birds chirping, the sound of sprinklers ticking across neat lawns. Mine began with my wife Mia standing on our porch smiling as she arranged a small charity table for the hospital relief fund. But then came the sharp click of high heels, and Beverly Kincaid, our self-proclaimed HOA queen, the Karen of all Karens, stormed up with a clipboard like it was a weapon. She ranted about non-compliant decorations and unauthorized porch usage. Before I could even speak, she crossed the line, literally stepping onto our porch, pointing in my wife's face. And then with a vicious grin, she kicked. I saw Mia tumble down the stairs in what felt like slow motion, her gasp cut short by the impact on the stone walkway. Rage and fear hit me at once, but training took over. Stabilize her neck, call 911. And then with one hand trembling, I pressed a button on my sat phone. 3 minutes later, the street shook with the thunder of 5 military convoys rolling in. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment with your city and local time. I want to know where you're watching from. When people ask why I moved into this neighborhood, I usually laugh first. On paper, it looked like a slice of the American dream: tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, a glittering lake only a few blocks away, and a promise of community harmony printed on the glossy HOA brochure. The realtor's smile could have sold sand in the desert, but I didn't need convincing. My wife Mia and I thought it was time to settle into something quiet. After years of deployments, and then years of chasing down one disaster drill after another, in my work as an emergency operations contractor, I wanted stillness. Stability, a place where Mia's patients at the hospital could send thank you cards to a real address, not a P.O. box that changed every year. But you know what? They never tell you in those glossy brochures that behind every harmony committee lurks someone who craves power more than peace. In our case, that person was Beverly Kincaid, better known, at least in my private thoughts, as HOA Karen. She wasn't president of the board. No, Mitch Albright technically held that role, but she might as well have been. Mitch was about as firm as overcooked pasta, and Beverly had the iron grip. Her kingdom wasn't a castle, it was a 3-bedroom ranch house with plastic flowers in the yard and a sign that said, "Bless this home." Irony dripped from every letter. From the moment we arrived, Beverly had her eyes on us. Maybe it was because I didn't bow to her clipboard when she strutted by, or maybe because Mia hung wind chimes on the porch that played something other than the HOA-approved Silent Breeze. Or maybe it was because we dared to be neighborly. We helped Linda Ortiz, our elderly neighbor with a walker, install a small ramp so she wouldn't break her hip trying to navigate her front steps. That ramp, painted a cheerful blue built with Tom Ewan's help from leftover lumber, was the kind of project that makes communities stronger. But Beverly saw it as graffiti on her canvas. "You're setting a bad precedent," she hissed one day, peering down her nose at the ramp like it was toxic waste. "If everyone does this, we'll have ramps and rails everywhere. It'll look like a hospital ward, Mia Ever." The calm voice smiled politely and said, "Better that than another ambulance call." That was the thing about Mia, her patience was a fortress. She spent her days in the ER juggling trauma cases and comforting families, yet she always found gentleness at home. But Beverly hated that kindness. It was like holy water splashed on a vampire. She wanted conflict. She thrived on it. It wasn't just us either. Tom Wynn, a retired Marine who lived across the street, got fined for having his flagpole an unauthorized 3 inches taller than regulation. Linda was told her porch plant baskets obstructed sightlines. Another neighbor was warned about his holiday lights being excessively joyful. Beverly didn't want a community, she wanted a canvas of control, and every one of us was a brushstroke she didn't approve of. At first, I kept my head down. Years in the military and emergency ops taught me the value of picking battles. You don't deploy the full arsenal when a stern word will do. I thought if I filed the right paperwork, wrote the right emails, maybe even charmed Mitch with a handshake and some common sense, we could fix the small nonsense before it grew into wildfire. So when the HOA installed what they called a temporary beautification barrier across the east entrance of our street, I didn't shout. I sent a letter. The barrier was a wrought iron gate, shiny and ornamental, complete with a keypad that barely worked. It looked nice, sure, but it wasn't just cosmetic. It blocked one of the key access routes that fed into the county's emergency corridor. That wasn't just bad policy. It was dangerous. I wrote, "Dear Board, as a professional in emergency logistics, I must advise that blocking this entrance violates both county fire code and state disaster response protocols. Please remove or adjust this barrier to allow first responder access." The response: a one-line email from Beverly. "Your concern is noted. The barrier stays." I wasn't surprised, but I was disappointed. I gave them the benefit of the doubt, sent a follow-up with maps, statutes, and even a polite offer to meet in person. Again, ignored. That's when my instincts started whispering. I'd seen enough disasters to know how they always begin, not with hurricanes or fires or earthquakes, but with complacency. The barrier wasn't just a hunk of metal. It was a warning sign. And Beverly, with her smug my street, my rules attitude, was the earthquake waiting to happen. Mia and I talked about it late at night over tea. She wanted to believe the best in people. Maybe she's just lonely, Mia suggested. Power fills a gap for some folks. I shook my head. Lonely people bake cookies for neighbors, Mia. Beverly files citations. It was around that time that Tom started nudging me. Jack, he said, you've got the training. You've got the contacts. You know what this barrier means. We need more than polite emails. He wasn't wrong. And yet I still hesitated. After years in uniform, you learn that escalation has consequences, and sometimes innocent people get caught in the crossfire. But in the back of my mind, the pieces were already falling into place. My work with the state gave me access to corridor planning, and I knew the guard had a drill scheduled for late spring. The timing, the location, the opportunity, it all lined up. And then Beverly crossed the line further. She sent us a violation letter claiming Mia's hospital charity table constituted unapproved commercial activity. Imagine that a nurse raising funds for trauma equipment labeled a criminal enterprise in the kingdom of clipboard law. I looked at Mia that night. Her eyes were tired, but she still smiled at me, still believed in this neighborhood. I didn't tell her the full plan forming in my head. Not yet. But I knew one thing: sooner or later, Beverly's reign of petty terror was going to collide with something far bigger than her HOA handbook. And when it did, I'd be ready. The morning it all erupted was deceptively perfect. A warm breeze, the kind that carries the scent of cut grass, drifted through the neighborhood. Sunlight bounced off polished SUVs lined up for the community yard beautification day, Beverly's favorite annual spectacle. She'd planned it like it was the coronation of a queen, complete with her marching down the sidewalks in a pastel suit and oversized sunglasses, barking orders through a megaphone she bought on the HOA budget. Mia, ever the optimist, decided to use the occasion for good. She set up a small folding table at the edge of our porch, draped with a soft blue cloth, a hand-lettered sign reading Hospital Relief Fund, Help Us Save Lives. She had a tray of cookies, brochures, and a simple donation jar. Nothing flashy, nothing obtrusive, just kindness made tangible. I remember looking at her as she arranged the table, the morning light catching her hair, and thinking, this is what community should look like. And then, predictably, came the sound I'd grown to dread, the sharp click-clack of Beverly's designer heels. It was like the soundtrack of doom in this neighborhood. She approached with that familiar expression, the kind of half-smile that wasn't joy but a warning, like a shark showing teeth. Unauthorized activity, she snapped before she was even on our property. Clipboard in hand, pen poised like a dagger, she started scribbling. This table is not compliant. Section 4.3 of the HOA regulations clearly prohibits any commercial or charitable activity without prior board approval. Mia, calm as ever, offered her one of the cookies. It's just for the hospital, Beverly. You're welcome to donate. If kindness could melt ice, Beverly was made of titanium. She ignored the cookie and whipped out a yellow measuring tape from her tote bag, snapping it open like a gunslinger. She crouched down and measured the distance between the table and the walkway. Too close to the path, she muttered. Obstruction hazard. And these flyers, solicitation, completely out of order. Neighbors began to gather. Some shook their heads, others whispered into their phones. I caught Tom Wynn across the street, arms folded, jaw clenched, recording with his phone like he'd been expecting this. I stepped onto the porch. Beverly, this is ridiculous. It's a charity table, not a street bazaar. Nobody's obstructed, nobody's complaining. She straightened, nostrils flaring. Rules are rules, Mr. Mercer. If we allow this, what's next? Garage sales every weekend. Flea markets, chaos. Chaos, I said, is kicking an old lady's ramp off her porch. This is goodwill. That jab landed, her eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, crossing onto my porch without invitation. Her perfume hit me before her words did, sharp and artificial. You people think you're above the HOA, she hissed, but in my community everyone obeys. My community, she said. Not ours, not the board's, hers. The words clanged in my head like a warning bell. Mia tried to diffuse it, bless her heart. Beverly, please, it's just one day. It helps the hospital, helps all of us. But Beverly didn't want peace. She wanted domination. She jabbed her clipboard toward Mia's chest. Pack it up, or face fines. Mia stood her ground. Number. That single word must have detonated something inside Beverly. She let out a laugh, high-pitched fake, and then with a suddenness that shocked even me, she lifted her foot and shoved forward. It wasn't a stumble or an accident. It was deliberate, a kick. Time slowed. I saw Mia's eyes widen as she lost her balance. Her arms flailed the cookie tray, clattering to the ground. Then she tumbled down the porch stairs, a sickening thud, echoing as her body struck the stone walkway. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone screamed. My heart stopped. I was at her side in 2 strides, instincts kicking in. Mia, don't move, I knelt, sliding my hands to stabilize her neck. Her breath came in shallow gasps, eyes glassy with shock. My own pulse thundered in my ears, but my voice stayed calm, the voice drilled into me after years of triage drills. Stay with me, sweetheart. You're okay. You're okay. Around us, chaos erupted. Neighbors shouted. Phones recorded. Beverly stood frozen, mouth open, as if realizing for the first time the gravity of what she'd done. Mitch, the spineless president, jogged over, wringing his hands, muttering, Oh dear, let's all calm down. Calm down, Tom barked from across the lawn. She just assaulted a nurse. I barked at Mitch, call 911 now. Then, I fumbled for my phone, hitting speaker as I rattled off details. Adult female, late 30s, fall down 4 porch steps possible, spinal injury conscious, breathing shallow, need EMS priority 1. The dispatcher's voice steadied me, but rage was boiling under my skin. I looked at Mia's pale face, then at Beverly, still clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. That's when my hand slid into my pocket, finding the cold weight of the sat phone, a device I rarely carried, meant for emergencies only. And this was the definition of emergency. My thumb pressed the recessed button labeled Amber 1. To the neighbors, it looked like nothing. Just another phone call. But I knew what it meant. That ping traveled straight to the state's Emergency Operations Center. It meant that the ongoing National Guard drill could be escalated into live-action response. It meant that within minutes, the barrier Beverly was so proud of would be tested not by emails, not by polite requests, but by steel, diesel, and command authority. I looked at Beverly then, and for the first time, I didn't see a tyrant. I saw a petty dictator standing on the wrong battlefield. The sound of sirens in the distance grew louder. But it wasn't just sirens. Beneath it came another sound, low, rhythmic, unmistakable. The rumble of engines, heavy engines. 3 minutes. That's all it took. And when the ground began to shake, every single person on that street turned their heads to see 5 military convoys rolling in. The human brain has a funny way of registering sound when adrenaline is pumping. At first I thought the low rumble was my own heartbeat echoing in my skull. But then it grew louder, steadier, with a rhythm no body could match, the roar of diesel engines, dozens of them grinding up the road like an oncoming storm. The crowd of neighbors froze. Heads turned as the first olive-drab Humvee appeared, followed by a line of transport trucks, stretching as far as the eye could see. Their headlights cut through the morning sun, and the sheer weight of their presence made the asphalt tremble under our feet. This wasn't a delivery truck or a parade float. This was 5 full National Guard convoys rolling straight into our HOA like Judgment Day on wheels. I tightened my grip on Mia's hand, whispering, "Hold on, sweetheart. Help's here." Beverly, on the other hand, didn't look relieved. Her jaw dropped, clipboard clutched to her chest as if she'd just realized she'd kicked the wrong beehive. What is this?" she stammered, glancing around for backup that wasn't coming. Mitch hovered uselessly behind her, muttering something about a misunderstanding. The lead Humvee halted right at the so-called beautification barrier. Soldiers spilled out in full gear boots, striking pavement in unison. The officer in charge, a tall woman with sharp eyes and the aura of someone used to command, strode forward. I recognized her immediately, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Wolfe. We'd crossed paths years ago during a statewide disaster drill. She was competent, relentless, and allergic to nonsense. She scanned the scene in seconds, a fallen woman on the ground, neighbors recording an illegal gate blocking her convoy, and one overdressed suburban tyrant standing in the middle of it all. Her voice cut the air like a blade. "What happened here?" Deputy Reed from the county sheriff's office, arriving just behind the convoy, jogged up and answered before Beverly could open her mouth. "Assault. Civilian pushed down the stairs. Victim stable but injured. EMS en route. And this gate," he gestured at the wrought iron monstrosity, "is blocking emergency access." Colonel Wolfe's eyes flicked to me, then to the sat phone still clipped at my belt. Recognition flashed across her face, and her jaw tightened. "Mercer," she said curtly. "I should have known. You activated Amber 1. "Yes, ma'am," I replied. "Barriers non-compliant. Multiple complaints ignored. My wife's down. I wasn't going to gamble on response times." She gave the smallest nod. Not approval exactly, but acknowledgement that I'd played the right card. Then she barked orders. Engineer unit prep to cut that barrier. MPs secure the scene. Medics assist EMS when they arrive. The soldiers moved like clockwork. One squad unrolled hydraulic cutters, sparks ready to fly. Another cordoned off the crowd, herding gawking neighbors to the sidewalk. A medic knelt beside Mia, slipping on gloves with steady hands. The efficiency was almost beautiful, except for the fury twisting in my gut. Beverly finally found her voice. She thrust her clipboard toward Colonel Wolf like it was a badge. "Excuse me, this is private property. You can't just barge in here. I'm vice president of this HOA and these vehicles are not authorized." Colonel Wolf didn't even blink. "Ma'am, this is a designated emergency corridor under state statute. You've obstructed it with an unauthorized structure. Stand aside." "I will not," Beverly snapped her voice, trembling but loud. "This is my street. You people answer to me." The collective laugh that rippled through the neighbors was almost enough to break the tension. Even Tom, recording from across the lawn, muttered, "Lady, you just tried to tell the U.S. Army to check in with your clipboard." Colonel Wolf raised one brow. "MPs," she said calmly. Two soldiers stepped forward, towering over Beverly like statues come to life. "Ma'am, move aside or you will be physically removed." For the first time, Beverly faltered. Her eyes darted between the soldiers, the cutting torch sparking at the gate and the cluster of phones recording her every twitch. But pride is a stubborn disease. She planted her heels and shouted, "This is harassment. I'll fine every one of you. I'll sue." The MPs didn't budge. Neither did Wolf. And then, with a hiss and a shower of sparks, the engineers sliced through the barrier's locking mechanism. The gate screeched as it was forced open, metal groaning in protest before giving way entirely. The convoy engines roared back to life, trucks lumbering forward, reclaiming the emergency corridor as if it had never been blocked. The sight was biblical. 5 convoys stretching down the street, olive-drab giants rolling past cookie-cutter houses with white fences and manicured hedges. Neighbors filmed with open mouths, some cheering quietly under their breath. For once, Beverly's clipboard was powerless. Mia groaned softly, pulling me back to her side. The medic reassured me, "Stable vitals. Possible concussion, but we'll let the hospital confirm. EMS is 2 minutes out." I kissed her forehead, fury and relief swirling together. "You're safe now," I whispered. When I looked up, Beverly was still sputtering, but the tide had turned. The crowd wasn't with her anymore. They'd seen too much: her kick, her arrogance, her attempt to stop literal soldiers from doing their jobs. The illusion of power had cracked. Colonel Wolf turned back to me. "We'll file the incident report with the county attorney. Everything's on record." "You'll testify?" "Gladly," I said, my voice flat with certainty. Wolf nodded once more, then addressed the crowd. "For the record, obstruction of emergency access is a criminal offense. If anyone else was complicit in erecting this barrier, now would be the time to come forward." Mitch looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. He raised a trembling hand. I didn't know. Beverly said it was decorative." "Save it for the county," Wolf snapped. Beverly's face twisted. She shrieked, "You're all against me. This is a conspiracy. I am this community." But the soldiers weren't listening anymore. Neither were the neighbors. The convoys kept rolling, reclaiming the road Beverly thought she owned, and with each truck that passed her reign, shrank smaller and smaller. And in that moment, I knew the game had changed. The second the convoys secured the road, the scene shifted from chaos to choreography. You could practically see the invisible lines being drawn across our cul-de-sac, one side run by people who knew what command meant, the other by a woman clutching a clipboard like it was Excalibur. Lieutenant Colonel Wolf wasted no time. She strode to the center of the street and barked, "Command post here. MP's perimeter. Engineers document the barrier remains. Medics coordinate with EMS when they arrive." Her voice cracked like a whip. Soldiers fanned out, establishing zones with fluorescent cones that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. Radios squawked. Engines idled in steady rhythm. I'd seen it before on deployments and disaster drills, the speed at which order blooms from confusion when professionals take over. It was beautiful, even as my heart was still split between rage and worry for Mia, who lay strapped to a backboard now, a paramedic assessing her with calm efficiency. Deputy Reed stepped up beside Wolf, notebook in hand, body cam light blinking red. "We're treating this as assault and obstruction of emergency access," he said flatly. "Copy that," Wolf replied, already scanning a tablet with the corridor maps I'd sent her office weeks before. She turned to me. "Mercer, I need your documentation, all of it." I pulled a folder from my go bag. I always carry one. It's a habit you don't shake after years in operations. Inside were printed emails, statutory codes, photos of the barrier from multiple angles, time-stamped letters I'd sent to the HOA board. I handed it over like a soldier offering ammunition. Wolf flipped through her jaw, tightening. They ignored all of this, every word I said. Mitch rubber-stamped whatever Beverly wanted. I warned them about this exact scenario. Wolf muttered something under her breath. I won't repeat, then snapped her fingers at an aide. Scan these. Forward to county legal and the state office. Meanwhile, Beverly was gathering herself for another round. She stomped forward, heels clicking, clipboard raised like a holy relic. Excuse me. You cannot establish a command post on HOA grounds without authorization from the board. This is private property. You are trespassing. The MP closest to her didn't even blink. Ma'am, step back behind the perimeter. I am the perimeter, she screeched. You have no jurisdiction here, Deputy Reed chuckled darkly. Lady, I hate to break it to you, but state law outranks your HOA bylaws. Obstruction of an emergency corridor is a misdemeanor at best, felony at worst. And that kick you delivered, that's assault, plain and simple. Her face flushed, beet red. She jabbed a manicured finger toward me. He's making this up. He set me up. This is harassment. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just stared her down and said, You did this to yourself, Beverly. And it's all on video. That was the kicker. Half the neighbors had their phones pointed at her, recording every outburst. Tom Wynn, in particular, was narrating like a war correspondent. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we see the Queen of Citations facing the full might of the United States military. Will her clipboard prevail? Even some of the soldiers cracked smiles. Colonel Wolfe didn't. She pointed directly at Beverly. Ma'am, your obstruction has already been documented. If you continue interfering, you will be detained. You can't detain me. I'm vice president of this HOA. Wolf raised an eyebrow so sharp it could have cut steel. Not exactly a federal position, ma'am. Neighbors snickered. Mitch buried his face in his hands. At that moment, the EMS ambulance screeched into the neighborhood siren, fading as it stopped. Paramedics rushed to Mia, conferring quickly with the guard medic already stabilizing her. They lifted her carefully into the rig. I squeezed her hand as they wheeled her away. I'll be right behind you, I promised. She gave me the faintest smile before the doors closed. My chest ached watching her go, but I knew the show here wasn't over yet. With Mia safe in professional hands, I turned back to the battlefield. Inspector Ramos from the city arrived next, clipboard of his own, but unlike Beverly's, his actually mattered. He snapped photos of the barrier, shook his head, and muttered, This is a code violation on 6 different levels. Blocking ADA access, fire lane obstruction, no construction permit. He glanced up at Beverly. Who authorized this? She puffed out her chest. I did. As vice president, I have full authority. Ramos cut her off. You had no authority. This is coming down. Today. The color drained from Mitch's face. He stammered, but the board voted. Then the board violated the law, Ramos said flatly, and the fines will reflect that. I almost felt sorry for Mitch, almost. He'd been a puppet and the strings were showing now. Meanwhile, Wolf was already drafting her incident log. She turned to me again. Mercer, your sat phone ping will be included in the drill report. This entire event now transitions from exercise to live incident. Congratulations, you've officially proven your point. There was no sarcasm in her tone. If anything, it was respect, mixed with grim satisfaction. I nodded. Didn't want it proven like this, but I'll take it. Beverly, however, wasn't finished. She marched right up to Wolf, waving her clipboard. I demand that all these vehicles leave immediately. You are lowering property values and scaring residents. Wolf stepped so close their noses were inches apart. Her voice dropped to a growl. You lowered property values the second you assaulted a woman on her own porch. Now stand down before I have you cuffed. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Beverly, Queen of Noise, had no comeback. She sputtered, opened her mouth, then closed it again. For once her clipboard failed her. As the convoys rolled slowly through the now cleared corridor, neighbors whispered and filmed, sending clips that would go viral before sundown. Some looked at me with newfound respect, others with gratitude. And Beverly, she looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, diminished, not by me, but by the truth finally catching up. I exhaled slowly. The war wasn't over yet, but the battlefield had shifted, and this time Beverly was fighting uphill with nothing but paper and pride against steel and law. And I knew which side wins that fight. I've seen a lot of takedowns in my time, drug raids, disaster audits, supply chain investigations, but nothing prepared me for the absurdity of watching a suburban HOA unravel under the glare of body cams and receipts. It wasn't bombs or bullets that were about to crush Beverly's empire. It was paperwork. And believe me, Paperwork cuts sharper than steel when you've spent years hiding behind a clipboard. Deputy Reed was the first to shift gears. He flicked on his body cam, pointing a steady finger at Beverly. "Ma'am, this device is recording. For the record, state your full name and your position with the HOA." Her chin lifted. "Beverly Kincaid, Vice President of the Rosewood Homeowners Association. And I demand that you cease this harassment immediately." Reed's lips twitched like he was trying not to laugh. "Noted. Now, for the record, witnesses have reported you physically assaulted Mrs. Mia Mercer, resulting in injury. Do you deny this?" Beverly blustered. "It was an accident. She tripped." Tom Wynn's voice cut through like a bayonet. "I've got the whole thing on video. You kicked her." And just like that, half a dozen phones went up, screens flashing as neighbors replayed the clip in real time. The sound was unmistakable. The sharp thud of Beverly's foot connecting the gasp from Mia, the collective cry of shock. One neighbor even had slow-motion footage. Reed leaned in. "Looks intentional to me." Beverly's face went chalk white. Meanwhile, Inspector Ramos was building his own case. He crouched by the barrier's remains, snapping photos, muttering code violations like a grim mantra. No permit. Wrong materials. Blocking ADA pathway. Fire code breach. Unlicensed contractor work. He paused and glanced at me. "You said you've emailed the board about this." I nodded. 3 times. Ignored every time. He pulled a tablet from his bag and logged into the city's permit database. A few taps later, his brows shot up. "Interesting. The official application for this gate lists a contractor by the name of Kincaid Landscaping." I nearly laughed. "Kincaid, as in her cousin Ramos confirmed, holding up the screen. LLC filed last year. No license on record. Looks like a shell company." The neighbors gasped audibly. Tom muttered, "Oh, she's done." Colonel Wolfe crossed her arms. "So funds meant for HOA maintenance went into a family member's pocket." Ramos nodded grimly. "Classic self-dealing. That's fraud, if proven." And the hits kept coming. One of Wolfe's aides approached with a tablet showing fresh footage from the guard's vehicle dash cams. The entire scene, Beverly yelling the barrier, blocking the convoy, the sparks as engineers cut it open, had been captured in 1080p clarity. Wolfe smirked as she reviewed it. "Congratulations, Miss Kincaid. You're starring in a training video on what not to do," Beverly snapped. "This is outrageous. You people are conspiring against me." "I'll sue every one of you." Reed held up a citation slip like a magician, revealing his final trick. "Ma'am, you're already facing charges of assault and obstruction. Keep talking, and I'll add disorderly conduct." Mitch, the hapless president, finally broke. He wrung his hands, sweat staining his polo shirt. "Please, Beverly, stop. We can't keep this up. They've got evidence." "Shut up," Mitch, Beverly hissed. "You're useless." For once, Mitch found a shred of backbone. He turned to Reed. "I'll cooperate. I have the HOA's financial records at home. I'll hand them over." You could almost hear the collective gasp. Beverly whirled on him. "You traitor." But Mitch wasn't done. His voice shook, but the words were firm. "I didn't sign up for this. I thought it was about keeping lawns neat, not laundering money. She pushed us all into it. I don't want to go down with her." The crowd erupted. Neighbors whispered some filming, others shouting things like, "We knew it, and you'll pay for this." Beverly Deputy Reed radioed for backup. "Possible financial crimes investigation. Secure HOA records as soon as possible." Ramos scribbled notes furiously. "City will issue an emergency order to dissolve this barrier and audit all association expenditures." Colonel Wolfe, never one for theatrics, closed her logbook. "From this moment, this neighborhood is under joint jurisdiction until the corridor is certified safe. Miss Kincaid, you're relieved of whatever authority you think you had." That was the breaking point. Beverly screamed, throwing her clipboard to the pavement. Papers scattered like confetti at a nightmare parade. She lunged toward me, finger stabbing the air. "This is your fault. You did this. You brought them here." I met her glare head on. "You're right, I did, and I'd do it again." The MPs stepped between us, firm but calm. Beverly's tirade dissolved into shrieks about conspiracies, property values, secret plots. But nobody was listening anymore. The spell was broken. The Queen had no crown, only a clipboard that now lay crushed under an MP's boot. As the convoys rumbled in formation, the message was clear. The HOA's reign of fear had ended not with a vote, not with a meeting, but with the undeniable weight of truth, law, and steel. For years, she'd hidden behind bylaws and petty fines. But against body cams, receipts, and the unified force of neighbors who'd had enough, Her empire crumbled in broad daylight. And I realized then this wasn't just about Mia or me. It was about every person Beverly had bullied, every neighbor she'd find, every kindness she'd tried to stomp out. The clipboard queen was finished. Most of my neighbors thought what happened that morning was some wild stroke of fate, like the universe had finally gotten tired of Beverly's antics and sent 5 military convoys to put her in her place. I could see it in their faces, awe, disbelief, even a kind of giddy joy. But as I stood there watching Beverly scream herself hoarse, while soldiers documented every inch of the crime scene, I knew better. It wasn't luck, it was design. Weeks before this explosion, Mia and I had already seen the storm clouds gathering. Every ignored email, every bogus citation, every time Beverly flexed her false authority, it all told me the HOA wasn't just petty. It was dangerous. That barrier was the final straw. I'd spent too many years drafting corridor maps and running disaster simulations to shrug it off. I knew what it meant. Blocked ambulances, delayed fire trucks, lives lost. And Beverly, in her arrogance, didn't care. So I decided to make her care. Mia was the one who nudged me into it. One night over tea, she rubbed her temples and said, "If they won't listen to words, maybe they'll listen to consequences." That's all it took. I pulled out my old Rolodex of contacts and made a few calls. Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Wolf, for one. We'd worked together on an earthquake readiness drill a few years back, and I knew she respected planning over politics. I pitched her the idea: run the upcoming guard drill straight through our neighborhood, stress test the corridor, document everything. Wolf didn't commit at first. Protocols and politics always tangled these things up. But when I explained about the barrier and about how the HOA had ignored 3 separate warnings, her tone shifted. "You're telling me," she said, "there's a community so arrogant they'd block a state emergency route?" "Yes, ma'am. And you have documentation." I sent her the emails, the maps, the photos. 10 minutes later, she called back. "All right, Mercer, we'll route it your way. But if this goes live, it's on you." I smiled. That's the point. The sat phone ping wasn't some panic button pulled out of desperation. It was part of the plan, a test within a test. If an incident occurred, say an assault, a medical emergency, anything serious, the drill could be escalated to real-time response. And when Beverly kicked Mia down those stairs, I didn't hesitate. The plan kicked into gear. Watching Wolf command her troops, I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. The timing had been perfect. Mia stabilized by professionals, the barrier cut open for all to see. Beverly exposed in the harshest light imaginable. And all of it documented not just by neighbors with smartphones, but by the guard, the sheriff's department, city inspectors, and county legal. As the convoy continued its slow march through the corridor, Wolf came over to me. Her voice was low but sharp. "You planned this, didn't you?" I met her eyes. "I planned for accountability. The assault, that part wasn't planned." I glanced toward the ambulance carrying Mia away. My voice hardened, but it proves the point better than any drill could. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "You know, Mercer, sometimes it takes people like you, people willing to make noise, to force the system to pay attention." Noise. That was one word for it. To me, it was more like justice with an engine roar. Word of the plan spread quickly among the neighbors. Tom cornered me, eyes wide with admiration. "You mean to tell me this whole convoy thing wasn't luck? You set it up." "Not just me," I said. "Mia, too. She coordinated with the hospital's disaster prep wing. We knew if we could line up the right day, the right drill, the right trigger, Beverly's kingdom would collapse under its own weight." Tom whistled low. "That's not just revenge. That's strategy." I shrugged. "Revenge is messy. Accountability is clean." Meanwhile, more damning evidence trickled in. Ramos pulled up HOA emails forwarded by Mitch in a desperate bid to save himself. One from Beverly to the board read, "Our street, our rules. Outsiders must be slowed or discouraged. The gate will ensure we maintain control." Another bragged, "No one will question us if we fine consistently. Fear keeps people compliant." When those words hit daylight, the crowd erupted in fury. Even neighbors who'd been silent before now stepped forward, shouting their grievances. One elderly man shook his cane, yelling, "She fined me for my grandson's chalk drawings." Chalk. Another mom shouted, "She told my kid's wheelchair ramp was a visual offense." It was a flood, years of resentment pouring out all at once. And standing in the center of it all, Beverly looked smaller and smaller, her power dissolving faster than ink in water. Deputy Reed smirked. "Looks like the neighborhood finally found its voice." Wolf closed her logbook. "And it'll have a new one once this is over. Interim receivership. County oversight. Maybe even dissolution if the audit pans out." Beverly's shriek split the air. "You can't dissolve my HOA, no," Wolf said coolly, "but the state can. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. The plan had worked. It hadn't erased Mia's pain or undone the fall, but it had shown the truth. Beverly wasn't a queen. She was a petty tyrant exposed under floodlights she couldn't dim. And the best part, it wasn't me who toppled her. It was the system she thought she controlled. As the last convoy truck rolled through the neighborhood, engines growling like thunder, fading into distance, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not victory, something deeper, closure, and I knew even as Beverly howled at the sky that her reign was finished. The days that followed felt like waking up in a different neighborhood, one that had been hiding behind a mask and finally tore it off. For years, Beverly had wielded her clipboard like a weapon, issuing fines for everything from lawn ornaments to porch paint. But once the convoys left and the county took over, her empire collapsed like a rotten fence in a storm. Deputy Reed filed the assault report the same afternoon. The sheriff's office officially charged Beverly with misdemeanor assault and obstruction of emergency access. Watching her being escorted into the back of a patrol car, heels clicking against the pavement, face twisted in outrage, was surreal. She kept shouting about civil rights violations and lawsuits, but her voice was drowned out by the click of cameras and the low buzz of neighbors whispering. Finally, Mitch, the president in name, only resigned within 48 hours. His letter, taped sheepishly to the HOA bulletin board, read like a confession: I allowed myself to be pressured into decisions that hurt this community. I regret not standing up sooner. It was the first honest thing I'd seen him write. The county attorney stepped in, quickly announcing that the HOA's finances were under audit. Rumors spread fast: embezzled landscaping funds, shell invoices, beautification projects that lined Beverly's cousins' pockets. For once, the neighbors weren't afraid of speaking out. They formed small knots in the cul-de-sac, trading stories of fines, harassment, intimidation. Things that had festered quietly now spilled out into daylight. And through it all, Mia, my Mia, was recovering. The hospital confirmed no permanent spinal damage, just bruised ribs, a mild concussion, and more soreness than anyone deserved. She wore a neck brace for a week, rolling her eyes whenever I fussed too much. Jack, she told me one night as we sat on the porch, you can't bubble wrap me. I'm tougher than you think. I smiled, brushing a stray hair from her face. I never doubted it. But forgive me for wanting to keep you safe. She leaned against my shoulder, her voice soft but steady. You did more than that. You kept this whole community safe. You drew a line. The line stayed drawn. Within a month, the county placed the HOA under interim receivership. Meetings that used to feel like tribunals now turned into gatherings of neighbors planning real improvements, repairing Linda's ramp properly, repainting fences with volunteer crews, even setting up a neighborhood watch led by Tom Newen. The atmosphere was different, lighter, freer. For the first time since moving in, I felt like we weren't tenants in Beverly's kingdom, but actual members of a community. Beverly, of course, tried to claw her way back. From her lawyer's office, she sent letters threatening defamation suits against anyone who spoke out. But those letters didn't land like they used to. People didn't cower. They laughed. One neighbor taped hers to a mailbox with a sticky note that read, "Return to sender, we don't scare easy anymore." The new board election came faster than expected. I was nominated by half the neighborhood, but I declined. I've spent enough of my life in command posts, I told them. It's your turn to lead. Instead, I endorsed a slate of practical, reasonable neighbors, people who cared more about broken streetlights than hedge height. They won in a landslide. Tom cornered me afterward, grinning. You sure you don't want the power, Jack? I shook my head. Power isn't the point. Accountability island. And besides, I've got my hands full keeping Mia from baking cookies for every soldier who drove a convoy through here. He laughed, clapped me on the shoulder. Fair enough. The last I saw of Beverly was at a county, hearing her lawyer whispering furiously in her ear as inspectors laid out violations and auditors read line after line of suspicious transactions. She didn't look like a queen anymore. She looked small, and maybe that was justice enough. Life returned to normal, or as close to normal as it ever gets in a place where 5 military convoys once rolled down your street. But whenever I hear the low rumble of engines in the distance, I smile, not because of the chaos they brought, but because of the order they restored. And every time I sit on that porch with Mia, porch-repaired ramp, freshly painted neighbors waving as they walk by, I remember that some battles aren't fought with fists or guns. They're fought with patience, with planning, and with the courage to press a button when the moment comes. For us, that moment came 3 minutes after a kick, and it changed everything. Looking back, what happened in Rosewood wasn't just a clash between one woman and a community. It was a reminder of something bigger. Power only lasts as long as people allow it. Beverly thrived on silence on neighbors, too scared or tired to fight back. The clipboard only worked because everyone treated it like a sword. But the second we pushed back with truth, with evidence, with solidarity, it turned into scrap paper. In life, bullies come in many forms. Sometimes they wear suits and sit behind desks. Sometimes they wear badges, and sometimes they hide behind bylaws and claim to be protecting property values. But their power is only paper thin when faced with persistence and unity. I learned that accountability isn't about revenge, it's about protecting the future. Mia's fall could have been so much worse. But because we stood our ground, because we documented, planned, and refused to be silenced, our neighborhood is safer now. So if you take anything from our story, let it be this. Don't ignore the small injustices. Speak up. Document everything. Find allies. And when the time comes, don't be afraid to press your own version of the Amber One button. Now I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Have you ever faced an HOA nightmare or a Karen who thought she ran the world? Share your story. And if you found value in ours, hit subscribe. Because trust me, there are plenty more HOA dramas where this came from.